Good afternoon to all the participants in the room as well as those online for this research workshop on working of patents in India, opportunities and challenges. We have today with us Professor Ruchi Sharma, who is a professor at IIT Indore, professor of economics at IIT Indore, but currently visiting ISID as a visiting professor for last 2 weeks. And so she will be sharing her latest work on working of patents in India. And then we have a panel of three very distinguished panelists, including Professor Sunil Mani, joins from uh, Netherlands, where currently he is, but everyone knows him. He was until recently the director at CDS Trivandrum, and has been a very distinguished sort of contributor on literature on innovation, technology, and all other issues of industrial development. Then Dr. Sujit Bhattacharya, Chief Scientist at CSIR NISCARE, or noun NISCPR, and I will ask him to explain what it is, and my own colleague, Dr. Reggie Joseph. Now, just to uh, get it started, a couple of points to set the context. We all realize that uh, innovative activity is very critical for sustaining the competitiveness of Indian industry. And we have a situation when our companies, enterprises are not devoting as much attention to innovation and R&D activity as they should. There is another problem that whatever little they do, we need to see it getting translated into commercialization, useful products or new processes which become more competitive and are able to drive our growth and competitiveness and export activity. But whether that is happening or not, this is a matter of research, and that is where Professor Ruchi Sharma and her colleagues have looked into the patents working of patents data, a very voluminous, unique set of data, which is based on the Form 27 submitted to the Patents Office on whether innovation which is embodied in that patent is being worked or not worked. And so this is very useful, very pioneering kind of analysis, exploiting a very unique database. And so I think there would be a lot of discussion on what we find and discover from this analysis of very unique data set. And I think only an IIT professor could have done that, because you have used artificial intelligence or machine learning to mine this huge data set using optical character recognition and all other tools by her colleagues. So using her economics knowledge and the setting of an IIT, which allows you to exploit these new tools, new digital tools, to produce a good analysis, is something which I find very interesting. And so, without any further ado, let me invite Professor Ruchi Sharma, who is very well known to this audience of people who work on innovation related issues, to present her work and findings. And then we will open up to the distinguished panelists first. and then to all of you who are participating. Over to you. Sir.
Thank you so much, sir. A very good afternoon to everybody, and good morning, Professor Mani. First and foremost, I would like to thank ISID and Dr. Nagesh to invite me here and have this wonderful hospitality which I've enjoyed for last 2 weeks. So thank you so much, and a fantastic working environment. Whereby I can actually revisit some of my results, relook at them, and then can work on this presentation. And so starting with the presentation, we would have to start the PPT. So the topic is about the working of patents in India, challenges and opportunity. This is an outcome of an ongoing project from ICSSR, and we are very thankful for the financial help that they have extended. And as Professor Nagesh mentioned, that it is a collaborative work. So the collaboration comes from Dr. Puneet Gupta because he's from computer science engineering base, and he helped us with the different models to extract data, and with Dr. Madan, Janak, Tanmay, and Dipti and Deepika, who has helped us with the data scrapping as well as collation and then analysis. So moving forward, I think all of us, agree that most of the countries nowadays they make provision for patent policy. The idea is to incentivize innovation and facilitate technology transfer. Though the evidence on both the account of whether it happens or not is rather mixed, but now having a system, we go forward from there and we look at how the companies actually use the system. And when it comes to using the system, it has been noted in the works of Grant Sturden that there are different motivations, for instance, to protect, to exchange, to block, as well as to have a certain reputation in the market. If you look at the first two specific motives, that is a motive of protection and exchange, then these motives are essentially related to the very task for which the patent provision is being made. That is to give them a protection from imitations in the market and also facilitate licensing and any kind of a transfer agreement. But when we look at the other two, then when the patents are being used for any other objective which is beyond these two, maybe to block others or maybe to have a high end in terms of a negotiation that they might enter into with their rival company or a competitor, there you see that the use of the patent has now moved beyond its limited objective with which the policy was intention. So as a result, these has been termed as a strategic use, and clearly, apart from the firm, there are other users of the patent systems also. And in current system, we have academic institutions, we have universities, we also have individual inventors, startups, and they also have different reasons and intentions to go forward with the patenting. So in that sense, if we have to understand the effectiveness of the patent policy, one way is to look at the broad categories of innovation in terms of number of patent files or license, etc. But I think that limits in terms of, because it's very aggregative means to look at it. We need to understand how the firms are actually using this system. So in that context, when we wanted to understand this, we found that the literature in the developing country context was rather limited, and that is what motivates this entire project for us. So then if we look at the literature which was there in the case of Western context, so there are two very important papers. They come from Walsh, Lee and Jung, and Torres and his co-authors. These are the papers in the a special issue of the research policy, and they talk about the patent use. So they actually formulate the base for our work as well. And there they focus on actually a triadic patents, which has been filed in US, Japan, and Europe. So effectively, they are looking at more quality patents, but there they also found that around 45% are not being worked or around 40% are not worked in the study by Torres as such. Then there are works by Giri et al. Who actually highlights that there are various factors which influence the transformation of the academic patents into the commercial ventures from university and from the public research organization. But a very interesting point they highlight that the ownership here also plays a very significant role, where PRS, there was a distinction in terms of whether it is being commercialized or not. It varies with whether it is being owned by a university or a PRO as such. So then with this, we wanted to analyze the extent of working or non-working of patents in India. We also wanted to investigate what are the characteristics of the patent itself, first of all, which might have influence on the working and non-working of patents, and then can we go further than that and explore the reasons for non-working. So here, if we again look at the conceptual framework in terms of what are the factors which will influence the working of a patent, first of all, technology characteristics is something which has been very well identified in the literature. Broadly talking about, there is a complex and a discrete technologies, discrete which will talk about pharma as well as a chemical, and complex which will include your electrical. Again, this is because of the technology cycles as well as the different type. So it will depend upon the technology characteristics whether they are being commercialized or not. Next, the issue is with respect to the ownership. As we have already discussed, the patents can be owned by either the firms, universities, or academic institutions. And when we look at academic institutions and universities, they may not have the complementary assets. So they don't have manufacturing setup, distribution setup. So definitely their capabilities also will vary to kind of a use and how they will use it as such. Lastly, again, patent quality, which is also of much relevance because quality patents are more likely to be used, and as a result, the commercialization potential will be higher and more for them. Then, when we want to understand what could be the reasons for not working, in case of to foreground our analysis here, again we looked at what are the different type of challenges which will be looked in the which are being faced by the inventors in the market. And that's one big question, that what are the reasons given by the firms when it comes to the non-working of the patent as such. So there we draw from the works of Walsh, Lee, and Jung. And what they have done, they have identified the reasons for non-working into essentially four main categories, which includes prospective, failed, as well as preemptive. But we have been bit limited from there because of the data constraints that I will talk to you. And so there we realize there can be three major reasons why they may not be able to use it. One is under the category of prospective. Here, what we are looking at an inventor who is open to using a patent, but is finding out maybe another licensee or has to do certain more work with the technology. Thirdly, they might be also kind of looking for market opportunities as to how they can use it. So that is a prospective kind of a category. Then operational, whereby they might be finding certain operational problems to kind of use the patent. And apart from that, because the work also relate to the data collected during pandemic, so that was also another reason that was being identified could be where they were not able to work. And failed one is where you find that either there is no market for that, when the actually the patentee realize that they are not able to manufacture, they can't sell it, there is no market in the country as such, and they may be failing to actually use it. So against that backdrop, we look at the patent history of the country, and we realize that there's a major changes introduced in the country in 1972 when we went from process when we removed the product patent in certain categories. But apart from that, also what we find is a major change here, which was as per the report by Dr. Justice Rajagopala Iyengar committee, which has identified at that point of a time that non-working of patent is indeed a major issue. And they identified because of the lot of patenting by the non-resident, you are facing a situation where there is a potential for monopoly abuse. And with that intention, they looked at the international patent offices, where also there were certain talks about working of patents, whether it should be done and how it should be dealt with. And learning from those experiences across the globe, the committee recommended that there is a need to have some details need to be given whether the patent is being worked or not. So when we look at the report and we try and understand there, once again the objective is to ensure that the patentee who is actually got a right to use their invention commercially exclusively also exert their duties. They also do their duty to report it back with how they are using that particular patent and then that particular right. After that, we have seen, of course, major changes in the policy. One, because of the TRIPS agreement, started from 1999 and then finishing by 2005. And one major outcome of that particular changes that has been introduced in the policy is the increase in the overall patenting in the country. So if the overall patenting has increased in the country, clearly we also need to know how those patents have been used. And another important issue is most of the patenting till certain time back were being dominated by non-residents, filed as well as granted. So then we also have to understand that whether there are differences in terms of resident or non-resident in terms of the working or non. So this was one form. This is the form 27, and we wanted to use the information which is given in this form. What I want to highlight here is the title here. If you look at the statement regarding the working of patent, many time in literature the issue arises: what do you mean by working a patent? Is it actually similar or comparable to what we may call as a commercialization? So when we look at the title, it's very clearly mentioned that working of patented invention on a commercial scale. So commercialization of the invention is at the back of the mind when we are trying to provide the information here. And the information is of course collected for the whether the patent is worked or not, the patent number, and then you see that if it is worked, then value also has to be given. And if not worked, then also the reasons has to be given in this particular form. Now, here I would just like to point out one thing, that this recently there has been changes in this particular form 27, and so most of this information has also been done away with. But we were lucky to have this information in this form 27. So we thought that it is given the recent developments in technology, particularly NLP as well as OCR techniques, can we actually use this and learn something more about the working of patents in the country? So that is what we did. At the IPO website, there was a portal, and which first of all, according to the patent number, will tell you whether it is worked or not. So we collated the information from that. And apart from that, there were form 27, which was filled for the. So there were two you can say identify the sources. One is the website itself, and then the information that can be gathered from the form 27. And from the website, we use the Python programming language, and OCR again for in order to get the content from the form 27. So that is how we went ahead about our data collection. So again, as I said during the main, when we identified the main objective of our study, we wanted to understand the different patent characteristics which will influence the working and non-working. There we again, use logistic regression model, because that is one the most appropriate, because the dependent variable is a binary here, either worked or not worked. The key regressor which we have, the patent characteristics, these are related to the conceptual foregrounding which I talked about earlier. Here we have technology characteristics, ownership characteristics, and patent quality. Ownership characteristics, assignee types, where we are talking about firms, government, universities, and individuals. Government essentially includes the different type of research labs, for instance, CSIR being run through public funds, and universities in our context also includes IITs and academic institutions, and then there is a category of individuals. We have also used a number of assignees along with these individual categories. Then for technology characteristics, we have first of all identified the technology category based on the IPC classification itself. But apart from that, the count, the how many IPC, this is International Patent Classification, and they actually give the, the entire group as well as a class group wise classification to identify in which particular category it will be following. But it is not only the class which would be mentioned, but number of classes that also be mentioned. That also is relevant. Why? Because that will reflect on where all this particular invention or a technology can be used as such. So the potential use is also somewhere highlighted in terms of the number of the IPC count. And clearly inventor count, more inventor count also will reflect on the complexity that will be there in the technology in terms of its usage, as well as where all it can be used. Now, patent quality is one another aspect which is rather complex and difficult to capture. And just one point, that most of these variable, as we have identified, has been picked up from the existing literature, and the justification is also being given in the paper for those. When I come to patent quality, clearly one issue arises is that how do we capture this quality? And how do you capture the, whether so the idea, as I said earlier, the quality patents are also likely to be more valuable. And in terms of judging the value of the patent, there are various variables which has been used in the literature. One of them being the citation data that is being captured. But in the case of Indian Patent Office data, we do not have information related to citation. So what we do, we use the second best option that we have, and we try to see if we can, use that. And again, identifying from the work of Bhavin and Williams, as well as the work of Shankerman, we identified claim count and grant lag. We're well aware that they may not be very close proxies, but they are the proxies which we can use for our work in order to capture the quality. So coming to the descriptive statistics, so if we look at it, the first initially, the data which was observed from the IPO website, it contained more than 5 lakh records. We have to, work around them and again remove certain blank records. Then once we got those records, so in that we have most importantly the patent number. Now that was linked to another data source, that is PATSIR, where we can get other information related to patent, because if just now I've discussed what are the different patent characteristics which are going to influence its working and non-working. So to capture that, we use this particular source. And what we find is that the final resulting data set is around 4 lakh observations which we have. And they're covering around more than 90,000 patents in our analysis. And further cleaning was also required when we did the logistic regression and coming up with the observation around 3,51,000. Now, in order to check how far we were able to, kind of use this form, is representative of the enforced patent. So what we did, as the table suggests, we collected the information on enforced patents from the annual reports of the Indian Patent Office. So, and then see that how many Form 27 for this, or the information we have for the patents in that particular year. And then when we captured for the Form 27, we realized that in fact, in a particular year in 2015-16, we have around 88.7% kind of information as such. So clearly the information has been growing over a period of a time, but as it is very clear that after 2019, 2020, there has been a dip in the number for a very obvious reason. During the patent years, we find that the reporting and the filing of the Form 27 has also fallen dramatically. So if we now want to understand information from this entire exercise, so what we have done here, if you look on the left side of the table, there we find out that how many of the patents has been worked, and as well how many of these patents has not been worked. So on an average, you will find that it's around 24% of the patents. So for instance, if you look at the year 2017-18, we are reaching around 27.3. And again, 18-19, 26.9% of the patents have been worked. The maximum number we around in 2019-20 around 27.4. So I will explain the right-hand side first. Let me explain the discussion on the left-hand side. So here we find that on an average, 24.72% of the patents has been reported as working, and with the maximum patent work during this particular time period of 1920. Till the pandemic hit, there has been an upward trend in the working of patents, and the numbers, however, though, as I said earlier, are in a slight, in a sharp contrast with the international patent use. And every year, so now I move on to the right-hand side. So here what we have done when we collect the data from the patents, so what other information we are getting. So we can get, there were patents who were worked in the last year, if they become non-worked. If they were non-worked in the last year, next year they become worked. And there might be patents for which the Form 27 will be filed for the first time. And how many, suppose they have been filed for the first time, how many of them were the category of the working? So we thought this information can also be helpful for us. And there also what we find some interesting point. First is that each year the share of unobserved patent is increasing. So suppose it has been observed in 12-13, whether next year onwards that particular patent information is given or not, that is not available. So it is reported once and then it is not reported. So that number has been considerably increasing. That I'm talking about the last column. Then if you see that each year, again, the number of new patents for which information is giving is also increasing. And another important point here we notice that there are certain patents which were worked and then they become non-worked. So how does that happen? So we went to look into the Form 27, and we realized that in that particular category there is they were importation. The patentee was actually importing and then using it in the Indian market. So one possible explanation could be that there was enough inventory which was not being used, and maybe after a few years they can actually start working, or they did not find sufficient market in the Indian context, and then they did not went ahead with that. So we can move forward. And the last point in this data is that around, in terms of resident and non-resident, this is a bit starking, because we find that of all the observation, around 12.3% are observations are from Indian assignee. And here, resident patents, again, on an average, they have been, 31.9%, while the non-resident patents are used 23%. So that means the residents has been, though the proportion is less, but they have been using the patents and they have been, having maybe the motivation as well as the wherewithal, knowing the domestic market and the distribution channels, they might have the tendency to use them more as such. Now coming to the results from the logistic regression. So here what we find is that most of our variables are significant. What vary is that the extent of the coefficient, because in logistic regression, of course, if the coefficient is very small, that means the probability increase of the working is rather less. So one important point when we talk about technology type, definitely it is a very important determinant whether whether it increases the probability whether a particular patent is worked or not here. And in case of pharma and chemical, we find that the coefficient was negative. That means if a particular patent belongs to the category of pharma or maybe chemical, then the probability of it being actually being reduced. And in fact, the coefficient is also greater than 2. So maybe the probability is also higher than 50% that it will not be worked. Whereas in case of electrical, the sign is positive. And again, very high percentage we get there, which is once again highlighting the results which we have observed in the international context of the discrete versus complex technologies results as such. Then in terms of ownership characteristics also, we have find the assignee types being significant and number of assignees is rather negative and significant. In case of quality, claim count, we found that positive and significant, and grant lag is positive and significant. I'll give the probable justification for that in a while. So when we talk about technology as a significant role, I think I've already elaborated upon this, that coming from even the international experiences where we find that the chance of the complex technology being worked is higher. Similar result has been found in the Indian context also. And in terms of patent ownership, that is one very important point, I think, which should be noted. And we really need to discuss it further, that the universities and governments are less likely to commercialize and their invention. In fact, if a patent is owned by university, the probability of it not being worked is around 96%. And individual patents are likely to work more because then they can really use that. They are able to monetize it and learn from that. So we also find that an increase in the count of assignee is likely to reduce the chances of working, maybe because of the complexity of managing the contract and the revenue sharing agreement, and or maybe potential overlaps of rights and conflicts. For both the claim count and grant lag, we find the coefficients are very small. So that means, incremental gain in the probability is rather low, though we find a significant result. Then what we did, once we have this data on the firm and the government institutions and there's others, then we interacted them with the technology type. And you see that suppose a patent is owned by a firm in pharma, then what are the chances of being worked? So that interaction results, I will talk about it. So here what we find is that firms and academic patents, again.
Somebody was asking a clarification, but you can address them.
Oh, okay. So then electric patents are more likely to be commercialized. I think we've already highlighted this, but if electric patents are assigned to government organization, it reduces the chances of commercialization. So then once again, highlighting that, we need to work on certain domain here. And the probability of working an electronic patent assigned to an individual is rather 42%. So each year, the probability to work a patent is increasing, but after 2019, we find there's a sharp decline for a very obvious and clear reasons. So here what we have calculated based on the same coefficient, what is the probability that a patent will be worked, which is again, we are presenting the similar data, but in a different format. Here you find that it reflects very clearly that when it comes to electric patent, 40% of the chances of it being worked, as you can see in the first, in the left-hand side diagram, and electric if you find there. On the other hand, the comparison with respect to mechanical, chemical, and pharmaceutical, the probability of it worked is being rather low. And if you go on year-wise comparison, there also you find that the probability of working of this electric patent is rather high and also reaching almost 45% around 2020. And after that, it has declined as such. Whereas when it comes to the working of the chemical and pharma, they are rather low as such. So now moving on to the next part where we are exploring the reasons for the non-working. I've already elaborated these has been actually based on the work of Walsh et al, where we are going to identify prospective, failed and operational. Here what we did, as I mentioned earlier, that the Form 27, when we looked at it, for most of the years, it was actually handwritten and then scanned. So that becomes very difficult for us to scan, use the techniques. But for 2 years, we found that it was submitted in an HTML or a PDF format, which was filled online as such. So then we were able to do the OCR techniques on that for those 2 particular years only, that is 2021 and 21-22. For that, we have analyzed 76,975 Form 27 to understand the reasons for a non-working as such. So here, clearly, as expected, the patent owners have also mentioned largely the prospective reasons that we are looking forward, we maybe are looking at market opportunities, we are looking for licensees, those kind of reasons has been reported, and or maybe market research is going on, or maybe for further development is required. Around 24 to 23% of cases we find they are actually the failed kind of reasons which we can highlight. So then when we moved forward, we wanted to again see whether in terms of technology type also, whether there is a variation in terms of the reasons that has been given or not. So here very interestingly, we find that in case of a pharma also the perspective is 65, electrical around 73%. And for the other next year, when we go to 21 and 22, they are also 68% and 66. Now here, one catch is there that if you look at our definition of prospective, it actually includes 4 things: exploring opportunity, looking for license, market research, and under further development. So if you look at the top 2, that is exploring opportunities or looking for licenses, that might be more relevant for a complex technology. Whereas the other 2, under further development or market promotion or some, market research is going on, that might be more appropriate for the discrete category. So then we wanted to understand those. So when we looked at the next diagram, here we can see very clearly, when we look at this category of under further development, so that is where the stark contrast actually appears in terms of discrete and complex, where you find that the percentages are a bit higher for the discrete technologies as compared to the complex technologies, because there the focus is to identify a licensor or may to look for an to cross license the particular technology or use it if it comes to that. So there we have looked at in terms of the differences along resident and non-resident. As pointed out earlier, residents are likely to use patent more, and in terms of the reasons given, we do not find much variation when it comes to failed operational or prospective. This is another table what we did, that if, because we have a data for 2 years, 2021 and 21-22. So somebody is reporting a reason failed. So what is the reason they reported next year? So is there a variation there? So we found that suppose if you look at the first column here, then 76% reported failed itself. Around 72% reported operational, but around 2% of them actually started working also. So finding an operational charge problem, but then started working. That is interesting. Huh? Then prospective somehow seem to be prospective changes only. So where do we go from here? Clearly, the extent of commercialization we are looking at is comparatively low when we compare with the international standards. The reasons for that could be manifold, as we have explored those reasons. It is also very important for us to focus on those reasons, because if we look at those first 2 reasons, we are looking at exploring opportunities, looking for licensors, etc. Then we are looking at the market for technology. Is the market for technology has developed or actually sufficient to support the working of the technology. On the other hand, if you're looking at other reasons like market research, other further developments, then from a our discrete technology perspective, what we are looking at is the maybe to meet the regulatory requirement or some more works has to be done. If that is the case, then the policy implications are going to be very different for us. So that is why it is very important to understand these reasons. And again, the low usage, we said as multiple reasons, but one thing really strikes as that is the, in case of the government research organizations, there is a very low usage. So we have to see. One thing here I would like to highlight that in the last 20 to 25 years, there has been a lot of focus in terms of whether we, patent or not. So we have seen, particularly after TRIPS agreement, there has been a lot of awareness programs being carried out. Even researchers have been made aware of patent and to do patent, and the entire discussion between publication versus patenting has actually been going on. In that context, I think definitely we have moved a step ahead in terms of patenting, but now is it also the time to maybe to go forward and identify the specific challenges in academia, in universities, institutions, government research organization, as to how do we commercialize those particular technologies. Interestingly, lack of market, this has also been pointed out earlier, like, by various experts, that even if you bring in a new technology product in Indian market, when you have a very price sensitive kind of a market, where is the space for a high price technology product? So that is again another thing which we can really, need to work on. And the non-resident assignee, of course, they have been dominating the patenting activity, though the last 2 years have shown us some bit different movement. Here again, when we look at it, the US, Japan, Germany, they have significant representation of our data. If that is the case, then the non-working also has to be understood from a different perspective. So when we look at those 4 reasons, it might be the case that they are actually, hiding or actually kind of covering the strategic non-use also. So I think the challenge would be to kind of, like how do we segregate those? So that is one important point. So coming to the limitations, clearly a study like this is first and foremost, there are going to be selection issues, because, but when we look at selection issues, we have to understand that there are 2 categories. One is that the people who are using the patent, whether they are reporting or not, or people who are not using and whether they are reporting or not. So if people who are actually using it, they would have the more motivation to report. Why so? Because we have seen a case in case of a NATCO, when the information was being used, and then again, you realize that it is not being used, and there is always a chance of revocation if it comes to that. So if we say that, okay, the selection is likely to be towards the people who are actually working the patent, then our bias is more, it's in an upward direction, right? So we are actually reporting results which are slightly more high. So where does it lead us? So that means if people who are not working the patents and they're also not reporting, then there is much more prevalence of non-working in the patents in the country, which actually makes it more, wary about the situation and want us to do much more analysis in that particular context. So I think going with that, again, even if we have a bit of a positive, or a selection bias in an upward direction, then, but again, the idea here is that definitely comparing to the international standard, the non-working is rampant, and we have to again figure out why that is the case. And the reasons for non-working, again, as we have talked about, there are definitely the requirements for the market for technology, which we need to understand. What are the challenges there? Are there certain high transaction costs which can be worked upon, which we can actually, understand and reduce them? And if there are certain specific challenges for the companies, can that be identified? And the support can, in that case, would be, extended to commercialize the technology. So towards the end, clearly, on an average, 76% are not worked in commercially used in the country of the patent. But again, we have to understand the stage of the technology market, identify the specific reasons there, and work upon them. Specifically different for the discrete and complex technology. That is one result we can say that is emerging, and because the requirement of those technologies are also very different. And again, we have been spending considerable amount of resources on providing the patents. And if the technology has been patented, I think the focus can also be towards maybe, helping in the commercialization, so that over a period of a time, we can look at a chance where are more technology generated products available in the market. But if we are looking for a solution, we have to actually, make sure that both the demand and the supply end of the markets have been addressed as such. So I think I will close here with my thoughts. So and we can, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ruchi, for sharing results of some very interesting analysis. I think it is a very important analysis that you have performed along with your colleagues, because it is not enough to do good R&D, but it is also important to ensure that the products of that R&D are used and commercialized. Actually. And so in that context, your results have a lot of implications, and what we need to ensure in our future R&D projects, that they lead to meaningful, outcomes, which are actually worked upon and lead to commercialization of new products. With that, let me turn to our three panelists one by one, and then we will open it up. So first one on my list is Professor Sunil Mani. Sunil, are you there? Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, I need to share my slides. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can see clearly, yes.
Okay.
Maybe you can put it on presentation mode?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Good.
Okay. First of all, I wish to thank ISID for giving me a chance to participate in this important seminar. And thank you also to Dr. Sharma for a very excellent presentation on this important topic, on which not much work has been previously done. And first of all, I think what I wish to say is that what I'm going to say is basically complementary to what Dr. Sharma has said. And I look at from the macro point of view, because she has been looking at individual Form 27s, and then looking from the point of view of why patents have been worked or not worked from a firm's point of view. So I look at this problem from the macro point of view, from the country's point of view. So the first one that I would say is that if you look at worldwide, the working rate for patents across the world is actually very low. Although Dr. Sharma was referred to a figure of 50%, and she of course added that it is with reference to triadic patents. Now, triadic patents are very high quality patents. For the same family, you take out a patent in 3 jurisdictions, which is USPTO, the Japanese PTO, and the EPO. So there is a fair amount of self-selection by firms and institutions to do a triadic patent. So, so those patents have a very high probability of, in any case, being worked. And so that's the reason as to why that rate is extremely high. But in general, if you look at developed countries as a whole, the estimates range from 10% to 30% for ordinary patents, not triadic patents, but for ordinary patents. So it's not very high at all. And as she has said, in the case of academic institutions, it's normally also pretty low. And but what is interesting is that India is the only country in the world having a very explicit policy on working of patents. No other country has actually an explicit policy on working of patents. And so to that extent, I think this question is very important for the simple reason that here is a country which has got an explicit law on working of patents, and why the working of patents is actually very low, as Dr. Sharma has pointed out. Now, let me start with some stylized facts about patenting in India, because I think these macro factors need to be borne in mind while we look at the reason as to why the working of patents is extremely low in India. First is that India's patent regime is known to have helped her to develop technological capability in certain industries, for instance, in the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry. Now, Dr. Sharma has shown that the working of patents in pharmaceuticals is actually very low. But here we are talking about a generic drug industry where they are actually manufacturing patent products which are off patents. So in that case, and the generic manufacturing industry has emerged as a result of being able to in a non-product patent regime, which prevailed in our country from 1970 until 2005. Now, in 2005, you have the TRIPS compliance of the Indian Patents Act, where our patent regime is now very similar to those which exist in other countries. And so for the multinational companies, this seems to have actually strengthened the patent regime of India. And although there are some questions regarding that one as well. Now, the third aspect is that India's patent regime has certain specific dimensions, which has actually where the policymakers have sought to make India's patent regime quite strong from the point of view of Indian companies. And the first one is the Section 3D, which is basically the to prevent evergreening of pharmaceutical patents. This applies largely only to pharmaceutical patents. Then, of course, the policy on pre and post grant opposition. Of course, the pre-grant opposition has been now completely relaxed in the very recent period. And the last one is, of course, the working of patents. As I mentioned before, India is the only country in the world having an explicit policy on working of patents. Now, as Dr. Sharma has also pointed out, majority of the patents which are granted in India has gone to foreign residents or MNCs based in India, and so they have not gone to more than 3/4 of the patents which are granted has gone to multinational companies or to foreign residents. And the share of Indian inventors is increasing, but its share is still pretty low. And except for pharmaceutical products, most high technology products such as mobile phones, computers, etc., are dominated by multinational suppliers. And most patents in India are filed by large firms. That is another interesting aspect. The share of SMEs have remained constant. And in fact, the Indian Patent Office have started reporting data on patenting by SMEs. That has remained constant. And I raise this point because if SMEs are actually taking out patents, then the probability of they implementing those will be higher than which are taken by large firms. Because again, as Dr. Sharma has pointed out, patenting is also used as a strategic variable, as an entry-return strategy by large companies to prevent other companies from entering that particular field. And the last point is India's technology trade balance has worsened over time. And in fact, we have been running a huge negative trade balance. Now, here is the figures on the share of SMEs, which have remained constant at around about 10%. You have the data only from 2018 onwards, because the Indian Patent Office has been reporting such data only from that period onwards. Now, the technology trade balance, you can see that it has actually worsened and it has increased over time, and it is now about $9 billion is the technology trade balance, which again shows that even the Indian companies which are actually working the patents have not been. And in fact, this data on technology trade balance, I must say, is also colored by the fact that other intellectual property right instruments are also in use. For instance, trademarks and so on are also included, because this is basically charges for the use of intellectual property and not just for licensing of patents. Now, two propositions can be made when you look at the patent policy, which has changed dramatically, especially since 2016. These changes in patent rules appears to have made India's patent regime very strong from the point of view of MNCs. Also, the MNCs actually, some of the foreign governments are actually doubting this proposition. And because MNCs wanted to export disembodied technologies to and also to create them in India. It has now become, the India's patent regime has actually become very strong compared to its position before 2005. But at the same time, it has made India's patent regime weak from the point of view of achieving technological self-reliance, And that is clearly shown by the increase in negative technology trade balance over a period of time, as we have much more importing technology rather than licensing technology to foreign entities. Then the changes in patent rules and policy have dramatically changed during the period since 2016. And the strength of India's patent regime, various indicators are available for measuring this. And then, of course, the weakening of India's patent regime, the very low rate of working of patents. And in fact, contrary to what Dr. Sharma has shown at the macro level, if you look at the, because what she has looked at is basically at the micro level by aggregating the Form 27 data. But at the macro level, if you look at the rate has dramatically declined over a period. I show you that one. And then, of course, the virtual abandoning of the pre-grant opposition to patent facility in 2023. So if you look at, for instance, the recent changes in patent rules and policy, you can see a number of changes which have actually taken place. I don't go into all the details, but basically only one thing which I take. One is the 2020 revisions to Form 27, which has virtually relaxed the requirement for its submission. So its submission rate has actually dramatically fallen, essentially because of, in fact, that has been pointed out by Dr. Sharma, that statistical fact that it has virtually gone down. And that is essentially due to the fact that this 2020 revision has taken place. Then, of course, you have the various other amendments which have also relaxed the thing. Now, here I bring in one of the important things, which is basically the United States Trade Representative Annual Report, which is the Special 301 report, which is done every year. There is a chapter on India as well in this particular report. And if you look at that report over the years, what you find is the following issues which are being singled out. First is that the United States especially has been, along with the other countries, have been raising this point about very narrow patentability standards in India. They're specifically referring to Section 3D, which imposes a higher quality on, especially for pharmaceutical patents to be, given. Second is the potential threat of compulsory licensing and patent revocations. Of course, as you know from the history, we have only issued one compulsory license so far. And then patent applicants face costly and time-consuming patent opposition hurdles because of the pre and post-grant opposition. And that results in long timelines for receiving patents. That is the pendency of patents, which has been about 6 to 9 years after application, has not really come down even after TRIPS compliance and after reformation of the Indian Patent Office, making it much more IT-enabled, increasing and bringing down the improving the density of patent examiners, etc. Still, the long timelines are there. And excessive reporting requirements for working of patents in Form 27 is considered to be virtually impossible to report. In fact, my own experience of pulling out some Form 27s have actually shown that, what I did was I pulled out for the year 2011 for, when the Indian Patent Office had made them public on the website. Now they don't seem to be. What I find is that most firms will submit a firm with, and in fact, some of the firms which are submitted by multinational companies and government research institutes and even Indian companies are simply blank forms. So the submission rate is, you submit a form, but there is no information in those forms. It is completely blank. And one of the reasons for reporting it as blank is that, it is difficult to, find out how much of the patent has actually been, either imported or manufactured within the country, because importation of an item which cannot be manufactured in India because the market is small here is also equivalent to it being worked here. Okay, and then of course difficulties related to licensing of technology transfer and so on, and the demanding registration requirements is part of these challenges. All these are being pointed out by the Super 301 Special 301 report. And as a result, the government has relaxed most of these policies over the last several years, especially last year, for instance. So there are two hypotheses, which can be raised. The regime, the patent regime in India has been strengthened, and I can provide some evidence for this evidence. And the second one is that it has also been weakened from the point of view of Indian companies. So let's look at the point of view of its being strengthened. So earlier you had something called a Jinnah and Park Index, but that index is pretty old. And so now what we have is the US Chamber of Commerce International IP Index, and this is the one for India, and it shows a slight increase. So the index will range from 0 to 100. The more closer it is to 100, the more strong the patent regime is. So our patent regime, according to the US Chamber of Commerce, has strengthened over a period of time. And another evidence for this strengthening is that multinational companies have now become very confident of coming and doing R&D within India and then exporting that R&D services abroad. So if you look at the R&D services that are being exported from India, that has really gone up from about $118 million to almost like $5.9 billion during the period 2004 to 2021. So you have such a dramatic increase in the amount of R&D services that are exported from India. And that is a clear evidence to show that India's patent regime, as perceived by the multinational companies, is strengthened, because they will not be interested in doing R&D in India if India's patent regime is actually weak, and the output of that R&D then can be leaked to local Indian companies and so on. Second indirect evidence is the fact that many multinational pharmaceutical companies have started doing R&D in India, especially since TRIPS compliance of India's patent regime. And if you look at the number of US patents which are granted to multinational pharmaceutical companies operating from India, that has increased from virtually 0 to almost like 37 now. Because the numbers are small, but it has increased from virtually nothing to a higher figure. So that shows that India's patent regime has been strengthened as a result of various changes that have taken place over a period of time. At the same time, it has also weakened from the point of view of Indian companies. And so you can see that India's import of technology from abroad has increased quite dramatically. And this is captured in terms of the royalty payments, which India has to do to external agencies, increased from $235 million to almost like $10 billion right now. And of course, I had already pointed out that this has become. And so this is due to the relaxing of the role on working of patents and the relaxing of the pre-grant opposition. Now, the relaxing of pre-grant opposition is very recent. It is only 2023. So working of patents, the submission rate for us, Dr. Sharma has also shown, is gone down. And I clearly showed that it is also the 301 report had constantly been complaining about this Form 27. So there is a kind of a virtual abandoning of this report in response to this 301 report, which has been by the United States Trade Representative. The second one is the working rate for patents. Here is what the numbers are slightly different from what Dr. Sharma has shown. This is at the macro level by taking into account the data which is reported by the Indian Patent Office in its annual report. On the numerator, you take the number of patents which are worked, and the denominator, you take the number of patents which are in force during this period. And you can see a dramatic fall in the number of patents which are worked during this period. So my argument at this point is that this fall is also to do with, of course, the point which Dr. Sharma raised at the macro level, in the sense that we do not have a market for technology, etc., here in India and so on. But at the same time, it is also due to external pressure which has actually been, because the multinationals have always been wanting not to work their patents here, especially the pharmaceutical companies. They don't want to, work their patents here. They wanted to use this as basically a entry deterrent strategy. Okay, and so it is because of that strategy that they are not working these patents. So it's basically a combination of those two factors. Now, Dr. Sharma has said that electrical engineering, and my suspicion is that electrical engineering is worked mostly because a lot of the computer-related inventions are subsumed under that particular category. And so that is one of the reasons as to why those things are worked. Now, I end with some policies for improving the working of patents. And I would first on my list is encourage more SMEs and startups to file patents. Now, of course, we have already seen that this has been happening. Of course, the share of SMEs has still been remaining constant at around 10%. Because as I said, the probability of a patent being worked is higher when it is actually done by an SME or by a startup, because startups actually implement they work their patents in most cases. So in both these have the government should come forward to encourage this. And so that's the first thing. Second is to frame policies through the Competition Commission of India to discourage patent non-use as an entry deterrent strategy. Now, of course, this is tricky because you need to find out why the patents are not used. Is it because they want to prevent other companies from entering? And in the case of pharmaceutical companies, you can clearly say foreign pharmaceutical companies not implementing their patents here, but filing the patent but not implementing it here is a clear-cut case of they using that as a non-entry deterrent strategy. So the Competition Commission should come forward and so on. Third is to popularize the patent box policy, which was introduced for the first time in the Finance Bill of 2016. And I'm not aware of, how far this patent box policy is actually being, implemented. And because you have a concessional rate of 10% for royalty payments, if you actually generate a patent within India and register that in India and then implement that, either in India or abroad, and earn royalty payments as a result of that, you have a concessional withholding tax rate of 10%. The third, the last point, which I would say is that reform the patent office by reducing pendency, because the pendency is still very high. As I said, about 6 to 7 years. After you have, filed a patent, you have to wait for about 6 to 7 years before it is actually granted. When internationally speaking, it's only about 3 years. So it's almost like 100% increase. Now, the government, of course, has responded to the pendency part of it by increasing the density of patent examiners. So if you look at the number of patent examiners per 10,000 applications, now, that has really sort of improved over a period of time. But if you look at the average experience of these examiners, they have only about 4.5 years as against 11 to 24 years, as in the case of most other countries, including China for that matter. Okay,
yes.
So very junior patent examiners, and also if you look at domain-specific examiners, it is very highly concentrated in electrical engineering and other areas, and not so much in some of the other areas. So you have too few examiners in some or
Yeah.
too much examiners in certain specific areas and so on. So my conclusion is that, the patent not working is not a point from the point of view of individual companies, but it's also a kind of political economy considerations where tremendous pressure is put by external agencies on India's patent regime. And that's clearly revealed in the changes in the patent policy which has taken place over the last so many years. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sunil, for adding to this discussion on working of patents by bringing the big picture issues, the strengths and weaknesses of India's Patents Act, and how it is doing something for the MNCs working in India on their global R&D, and how it is not helping about the technological self-reliance and what to do. Very interesting points. And now let me turn to Dr. Sujit Bhattacharya, because that time is running out very quickly. I see that 505. So we have one more speaker, and then I would like some open discussion. So Sujit, if you could kindly wrap up your comments in 7-8 minutes, or
I will be brief.
Yeah.
Actually,
Good. Thank you. Please go
point
ahead.
is that also because of logistics, and I would say that there are too many things today to be done. And thank you for the invitation. I was, in fact, in a dilemma, but I had to say, because it is such an interesting and such an important topic. And the paper was also such an interesting paper that I said, "Okay, I will have to just stop from my research council meeting and come here." So thank you again. And it is always difficult when Professor Mani speaks and then you have to speak again. And many of the points which he has said were also touching me on that. I was also thinking of those points across. One thing which I would say before starting, I congratulate Professor Ruchi on such and the team on such an excellent study. And I know that the difficulty of doing a study like this. The study on Indian patenting system per se, I would say, that the data has improved. As you have said, that it is now available in HTML format and all that, but still the challenges are there. I had done an earlier study, 2002 for the 2005, and I know that at that time, the changes you can see that it was the patent office was in Karol Bagh, in a place where right inside a very dense market. From there, it has come out, the institution and infrastructure has changed. So many of these other things have also happened. And in a sense, there is a sense of realization also that of possibly that the IPR patent, I would not say patent as such, IPR also becomes a very important tool if you have to have the self-reliance linked to that. But as if you look at when I looked at your study, it is a very interesting study and draws very important attention to the quantitative aspects of it and draws attention to many of these indicators of how we progress, what are the different type of technological classes, how they make sense, and that. I have looked at it from a different, when we look at it from a different angle, you find that how the patent landscaping, you can see that the type of very dense sort of linkages that happens within the technology classes, the type of family of patents that are there, which is very important also. Because I don't come from an economic background, but I use your economic things also to understand the patent landscape and the other things. And I find that many of the things which you have said echoes also to that extent to why this type of, why some of our patents becomes very difficult to be worked on and why they have these strategic advantages which they have. The number which you have said about that number also, when I looked at it, that was because of this triadic patent. And if you had expanded more with the more family of patents, the number will be more impressive actually. So, and moment you go back only to moving away from that, you will find that even the Forbes had said about 5 to 10%, 10% or so estimation there. So that way possibly, but if you see the other indicators, the amount of money which the patents have earned and the other monetary indicators, then actually you will be much more depressive results which will come. CSIR, because I'm trying to rush up. One of the points you have said, what our academic institutions patenting aspect which you have looked at. And see, at that time also being in CSIR and being connected to many of the public institutions, how they work and all, I have also seen when we are looking at CSIR that some of these patents of CSIR, yes, it has been because one aspect of it, which I am finding also at the macro indicators, is the patent for patenting sake. And you see the universities, I should not name those universities, but people deep down and see the universities which are patenting. Many of these private universities, some are good, but many are increasing that set of numbers also. And I'm not sure whether they are really interested in working the patent or for a different purpose altogether. Similarly, at a certain point of time, I will not say being in CSIR, but it is true that the number game was also there in CSIR because the way the promotion and the other forms were there, which actually prompted many of the innovators to patent and then forget it. But then again, when you look at these patents, some of these patents, when you do at the case studies of a few patents, how they have happened and changed that ecosystem, that was very interesting, in fact. When we looked at the polycarbonates and all what NCL had done and how with General Electric, a new type of alliances got created, how they could break the monopoly of an international company purchased. On the other hand, how a set of patents and plant variety protection created a mint market for CSIR. So CSIR, some of these patents, bioenhancer patents and all are also created a set of a niche, which is actually difficult to capture only through that, but it also created a socio-economic impact, which actually maybe these type of indicators are difficult to sometimes capture once we don't have, because what your study does is that it brings a very interesting thing is that it has a database, and from that database you have linked it up to patent seers and you can link it up with the lens and the other database also, and you can put in many more indicators, and then possibly a very good random sample, stratified random sampling, survey sampling can be done and can actually bring out many of the other hidden aspects of this working, of what that non-working means, what the working means, what the working and all. I will not take much time, but I would say that we had now looked at very closely the technology readiness level. And for that technology readiness, as you know also, that we have tried to define the framework. We are trying to look at the different sectors. And we are finding that when you interact with the large number of, and the interesting part is that it is not only the startups who are coming, it is also the agriculture universities. A few agriculture universities have also approached us. They have also developed a sort of prototypes. They are coming to us and trying to understand that what is that technology readiness of that prototypes and all, and whether we can move forward from that and all, what type of assignment of technology readiness level can be done. But why it is important in this context is that where the patents role plays there, we have found that many of these technologies are at the level where at the prototype stage level, where you have these patents, some of them are patented, some are not patented. The similar, when we looked at the CSIR portfolio and the other portfolios also we found. But moment you go from that proof of concept to the higher levels of in the operational environment and all, where actually you require those types of more proprietary knowledge, or you require more type of translation to that. That type of translations require a different type of a handbook, because many of the technologies where the patent, if you see non-work, you will find that they are at the TRL level 3 or TRL level 4. And at that stage, where the larger context which Professor Mani was trying to build up is how you bring your, what you call the, your own self-reliance, technology reliance, and there it comes, what is the different type of a hand-holding for this deep technology, for the technology ecosystem. The startup ecosystem has a hand-holding. It is saying that the patents can be filed if you have a DPITT registration. So you are giving incentives for filing. But once you look into what we are talking now is about the technology part of it, the technology movement where the patents play a role. And there I see where these type of policy interventions becomes very important. Then you have also said, I will not take much time. You will also said about the sectoral difference. And there I would say that we need to dive deep into that sectoral difference, because pharmaceutical, these are the sectors in themselves. So what are the subcomponents of the sectors where actually the things are happening? So because now you have those technology classes with you already, so maybe a next set of exercise because can tell us about more where what is happening at what level, in fact. So what I see a great promise of this study like this is that on one hand, rightly Professor Nagesh has said that you have one hand, you have an economics and you have looked into the different types of models. On one hand, you have a set of a very good team who can work on those the data and bring out these very type of hidden. Maybe some more what you call linkages with the policy and all, and looking at the qualitative studies which you can, then possibly the survey which you are saying. I think that survey which you had actually cited, both the surveys, which was saying there's a, even the Economic Advisory Council had said about the manpower, but they have not talked about the skill set of the manpower. And what is the, when we are talking of the opportunities, I have to say that the opportunities should also be there for people to be an examiner. One of my student, PhD student, he has become an examiner and he said that you are so good, you have learned so much. Why don't you do pass on an examination and all that? So possibly, I don't know, but he might be an isolated cases. So what I would say is that the opportunities for from the good technological institutes and all that, if they can also become, they cannot be full-time examiners, but they are also part of this, what you call the whole process of this examination process in some way or the other. That you, because no one would like to be within that system as an examiner, but they can be linked with that examination process. Because the type of patents which are coming and the types of patents which are getting filed, the standards which are coming and the essential patents within the standards are really will make our life very difficult if we don't have these type of skill set of people who can understand this, and whether what, how much, whether we can grant those claims or not. Because that will actually, if we grant those type of patents, we had a very good promising about that how 5G standard, that we could expand that standard and get in standard which can address to our to the local level also, and which is a very interesting standard which we have built up. So maybe we will be stopped in building those type of standards if
Right.
we don't be very careful with this patents. So I would say that there are many things to, it comes to my mind, and just I thought I will speak
Yeah.
verbatim on it. So thank you so much. I hope
Thank
I
you.
was-
Thank
it was
you,
useful.
Dr. Bhattacharya, with adding to this very rich discussion on the implications of these, results she's drawing from working of patents. Now, the final speaker is my own colleague, Dr. Reggie Joseph. Over to you, Reggie. Yeah.
First of all, I would like to thank the study team for doing a very detailed and insightful study. This study gives overall trends in the commercialization of patents in India and also looks into the reasons for non-commercialization. I'm sure there is scope for doing a more detailed study going into sectors, but probably you can do it in a different paper. But your findings have bearing on some larger policy issues, and I would like to focus on three such policy issues. One is that what is the purpose of Forms 27? So these forms, as Professor Sunilmani was saying, this form is only available in the Indian patent system, and this was introduced after a lot of deliberations. Actually, Indian Patents Act is called the mother of patents act in developing countries because many developing countries have borrowed provisions from India's Patents Act. So much it was drafted with so much deliberations and care. So it is providing for some safeguard provisions. We know the patents is very important for incentivizing innovation, but at the same time, it can also lead to abuse of monopoly rights. So this Form 16, our Patents Act provide for some safeguard provisions. So one important provision is the compulsory licensing. So we can issue compulsory licensing on 3 grounds, but one is very important in which a third party can apply for compulsory licenses. So if three conditions are fulfilled, one is reasonable requirement of public with respect to the invention has not been met with. Patented invention is not available to public at reasonable prices. Patented invention is not worked within the territory of India. So this means a lot of data is required, and who is capable of producing data? So a third party, it is very difficult for them to produce this data. So that is why it was obligated on the patent applicant to submit this data, so that in case if these safeguard provisions have to be invoked, the data is readily available. And we know we have issued only one compulsory license, and US and other advanced countries, they have issued many number of compulsory licenses, and it's very surprising to see that they accuse India of issuing compulsory licenses, but that's a different story. So basically, what we see is that the Form 27 provides the data required for these three conditions. Okay, so now what we have done is that over the period of years, as you pointed out, there was an argument that the companies, the patent owners have been asked to produce too much data, so that is why they are not complying with. So let us relax it. So in 2020, there was an amendment in which the requirement of providing information on whether the public requirement has been met at a reasonable price, that was done away with. But even after that, what we see is a drastic decline in the rate of filing of Form 17, from 47.5% to 3.5%, very drastic decline. So similarly, out of the Form 27 filed, the commercialized, its rate also declined from 25% to 11%. So what I am saying is that although we have introduced reforms to enhance the system, but what we see is that it is proving to be counterproductive. But on top of that, two developments in this year is going to be further weaken this Form 27 system. One is in 2024, we amended the patents rules again. So in that, the requirement of providing information on revenue generated in India out of the patented invention, that is done away with, and the India's FTA with European Free Trade Association members, it has a provision. No party shall require patent owners to provide annual disclosures of information concerning working of a patent. And the periodicity shall not be less than 3 years. So now it is annual. In the FTA, it is saying it should be, okay, it should be more than 3 years, less than 3 years. So with these additional requirements, we are going to substantially weaken the system. So this is one set of concerns. The second is on the quality of patents. You also pointed it out. Yes, commercialization, as you said, it's a strategic decision. Various factors influence that decision, but demand from the market is a major factor. So sometimes innovation meets existing demand. Sometimes it creates new demand, whatever may be. Meeting such a demand or creating new demand, it depends on the quality of patent. Here in India, we have a lot of emphasis on filing of patents, especially from the academic sector. So anyway, the point what I wanted to say is that the commercialization, it is not an issue confined to India. It is a major issue in China also. There in academic sector also, the rate of commercialization is very low. As Professor Sunilmani said, it is about 5%. So in China also, there was a lot of emphasis on filing of patent applications. But what it resulted in was that patent applications with poor quality. So realizing that, the China last year introduced special action plan for patent commercialization and application 23-25. So here its objective is to enhance the patent quality. Probably India also should think in that line to do something to enhance the patent quality also, rather than pushing merely the filing of patent applications. The third aspect is on industry-academia linkage. So the industry-academia linkage is very poor, and that's a very major concern. We know this Global Innovation Index, India's ranking has been going up. There are about 86 indicators used, and academia industry linkage is one indicator. In that, India's score is much low as compared to other indicators. And your study also points that the probability of commercialization is least if the patent is owned by a university. At the same time, it has a better probability if it is owned by a government research institution. I do not know why. It should be the other way around. It should be least feasible if it is with the government institution, and comparatively more feasible with the university system. But to find an answer to that, one way that can be done is to break up the university category. So now what I understand is that you include private universities, IITs, everything in the category of universities. Probably if you break them into private universities and others, that itself may give you a better picture. Because what I find is that some of the private universities, one university, it has more number of patent applications than the entire IITs put together. So given this size, budget, I don't think that is feasible to produce good quality patent application. In your analysis, if you do just this breakup, I think that will throw a lot of insight into this issue. With that, I will sum up. Thank you.
Thank you, Reggie. And, you added a number of other interesting points, which I'm sure, Professor Ruchi Sharma and her team, when they are further kind of dissecting the data base or data set that they have prepared, very rich one, will be useful, I'm sure. Now, it's actually, we are just running out of time, but with permission of everyone in the room and in the online, we can extend it by a few minutes to see if there are some questions from the audience, and then I will invite Professor Sharma to make some closing remarks. Are there any hands? So, yeah, Parminder.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma and other panelists. When you were speaking and you had spoken about so much decline in after 17 with Form 27 submission, and I was already wondering how it is happening. And then partly Professor Mani explained that it's a 301 pressure, etc. And people feel there's a laissez-faire, you don't have to do it. So the question is, of course, these reporting requirements, would be coming with penalties, right? I mean, that's the whole idea. Nobody reports other than if you don't report, this happens, right? But possibly the government is not enforcing it, and there is a general environment that people know that nothing will happen if they don't do it, and that's the only reason they could do it. Partly, as Reji said, that they have started to remove certain requirements like revenue generated within India. But that's an actual legal change, which you can't do anything to change it. But it seems that the environment is that if you don't report, doesn't happen, nothing happens, and that's generally being something which is happening, right? That's the thing, right?
Yeah, it's Isha.
I don't use this data, but just two thoughts are there. You have a time period. So if you could use hazard models, like the logistic hazard model, that will also take into account the time along with the regressors that you have taken. And the second is a clarification. I have seen there are count data models which are used for patents. So why they could not be used in this case? That's all. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other? Anybody online who is trying to raise any hand? If none, then I will invite Professor Ruchi Sharma to take some of the points that she wants to respond to, and any closing thoughts. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Professor Mani and Professor Sujit and Dr. Reji here for very insightful comments. And I think I will go first what been asking, like particularly count data model is used when we are having a total patent count as a dependent variable. And we are looking at different, reasons like why it is increased, decreased. So that is when it will be relevant. Here, if you look at our dependent, it is essentially 0, 1, worked or not worked. So accordingly, we have picked up an appropriate model here. And thank you for your suggestion. We will definitely look into the possibility of using that hazard model. And coming to Praminda sir's point, definitely what has happened is that there is this, even financial fine which has to be imposed if you if you do not submit the form 27. But there is definitely a laxity in the attitude of the Indian Patent Office also when it is not being submitted. And clearly that message has also gone through. And apart from that, the series of events which has happened, as has been pointed out by Professor Mani and Reji as well, that what you find is that there is a dilution as we move forward. But if we look at the main reason why we have this in our Patent Act, it actually comes from a very simple understanding that if the government or a state is providing, a right to somebody to kind of, have a monopoly use or commercially exploit certain invention for a certain period of a time, that right does come with a certain duties. And that duties is essentially to get back and tell how are you employing that right, and not to go ahead and kind of abuse that in that sense. So I think that was the major intention and motivation with which it was being introduced. And but clearly in the last we've seen that there has been a decline in the number of Form 27 that has been filed, and even the laxity of attitude is also somewhat responsible towards that. And with further dilution, what we are seeing that is clearly, we will not be able to, first of all, have access to this kind of an information to do maybe future research. And but at the same time, how do we understand the challenges of this industries or small and medium enterprises, academic institutions, which are very specific to the Indian context? Now, when we look at the use of the patent, we realize that most of the literature talks from the developed country perspective, though there might be strategic non-use. That could be, because the industry has grown to a level where they are able to strategically non-use. But the reasons when we talk in terms of a developing country context could be many, because of the low technological capabilities, or even, not having access to the required complementary assets. So without that, it will be very difficult to kind of push this idea where you see that the translation of research actually go forward. And with respect to academic, I completely agree with Dr. Reji that we need to do much more. But since we were constrained by the size of this study, we thought, okay, maybe the sector specific, as Dr. Sujit also mentioned, that we will take up those individual studies of pharma, maybe electric, and as we are already doing this academic and university related patent. And I also agree that yes, there was this kind of a, a movement towards more of a filing of a patent coming to the academic institutions, but how do they translate? I would also say here one point that the translation also requires a special skill set that requires identifications of the need of the industry and what has been produced by the academia or the research organization. Now, to bring them together, that specific kind of a skill is also very important. And we really need to ensure that it is available in our universities through these technology transfer offices, etc., to kind of help them with that. So I think, yes, thank you everybody for their kind words, and we really look forward to maybe expanding it to different sectors and then doing more work on that.
Yeah,
Thank
there
you.
are few comments on the side in this. We want to.
So assignee is based on the applicant information. That the first question, how do we identify an assignment? So the applicant in that case is our assignee, and whether it is basically based on the reporting itself. When we look at the time frame, so if they are reporting, that is why I made. If you remember, there was one table on the other end of it, whether it was worked in a year and then not worked, just to give a sense of the temporal sense of how the patents are moving. So, but we like that, and yeah. Yes, yes. So here I would like to say two things. First of all, if you are doing more incremental kind of a work, then the potential of getting a patent on that is rather limited. And so in that case, working and non-working will not be relevant. So when we are talking about R&D expenditure, then that has to be devoted to something which is novel, non-obvious, and having an industrial applicability. It has to meet those criteria. And clearly in that case, we can also, I think this is also interesting, we can look at that how it relates with the extent or the level of R&D expenditure which has been done. There's a possibility that the quality of the patent is also represented through low investments in the research and development. So I think that would be interesting to look at. Yes, and I do agree with Satendra, but that was the last point I was mentioning, that there is a need to have, this kind of a technology transfer offices, which many of the institutions are having right now. So they are moving in that particular direction. Maybe when we will do this specific study where we are segregating IITs from the universities, maybe we'll get certain more interesting aspects there. But to link that, I think clearly we need to, first of all, also make them aware about this TRL levels, etc., so that they can also raise the level of their work before they reach out to industry, and industry also understand what they can get in the academia, and then how to bring them together. I think I have answered Mr. Zaman.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have. Friends, now it's time for me to thank everyone, including our main speaker for today, Dr. Ruchi Sharma, Professor Ruchi Sharma, and the three eminent panelists, Professors Sunil Mani, Dr. Sujit Bhattacharya, and my colleague Reji, and all of you who participated in the physical mode and online for a very rich discussion. So let us give them a very big round of applause. Yeah, so thank you very much. I think this is the kind of detailed analysis of new unique data sets which are lying around but not analyzed we need to do. And so there is, she has found a very rich mine of data set available which has not been exploited. And with the, this is just the tip of the iceberg that she has scratched the surface. And I think a lot more analysis of teasing out, implications of working and non-working, and why it is not happening in this manner or that manner. Who are the people who are working with their patents and who are keeping it, as Sunil said, for competitive reasons. I mean, to prevent others from using that technology. So there are many issues it raises, and I think more detailed work as they go along would be very helpful. And this forum, which will be available to you always. So Ruchi, please feel free to use ISID seminar series, and we will give you all of these very eminent panelists and discussants to give you more ideas. Thank you very much indeed. So, colleagues, friends, please stay connected, and we will continue to have many such interesting discussions in our seminar series. And Sunil, you have one presentation due, I think.
Yeah, I will do it when I complete the paper.
Yeah. So we'll be in touch. We'll be in touch. Thank you
So
for
thank
for
you.
joining.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.